my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to talk about a few of my recent audiobook favorites. So I don't know about you, but during these turbulent times, I've definitely found that my reading has changed slightly, and I know that a lot of people have trouble in concentrating with reading during the time of uncertainty and of a lot of things just being sort of up in the air. But what I've found particularly helpful and a big comfort for me in terms of dealing with the current situation and in finding love for reading is audiobooks. I think just in general this year I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks, and it's part the situation and part for me just stress coping with school related things. So it's just been sort of a coping thing that I've done for the entire year so far, and today I wanted to share a few of my recent favorites. So I thought that if some of you are also looking to pick up a few audiobooks as a way that is sort of, it's especially when you find an audiobook that is really good, like a really good narrator especially, or a really good story in the audio form, I find that it doesn't require the same sort of presence. You more easily become invested in the story, I feel like, or at least that's how it is for me. It's sort of a storytelling, like as a child when you're listening to storytelling, that's sort of the vibe that I'm feeling with listening to audiobooks. And one of the things that I've especially found helpful is historical fiction on audio. But yeah, that was a really long introduction. Basically, I've found that this is my favorite kind of reading at the moment, and has been for a little while, and I wanted to share a few of my recommendations of audiobooks that I've listened to recently, and two that I've listened to last year. The first one I wanted to recommend is actually not a historical fiction novel. It's a contemporary literary fiction novel that has very recently come out, and it is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell and narrated by Grace Gummer. So this is a story of a girl who was, as a 15-year-old, in a relationship with her much older male teacher, and the story is both told through the present time when the girl is now an adult woman, and she's looking back on this relationship and sort of reinterpreting it, and part of the story is also telling what actually happened back in time to the school situation and the relationship developing. So the theme of the book is really dark, and a lot of it is kind of unflinching in the way that it deals with this topic of sexual assault and sexual abuse. But the thing that made me want to recommend this is because the audiobook was really good, really well narrated. I really liked this one. I liked the way that it dealt with the topic, and I've actually written a full review, so I will link that below. But for me, a big part of my my connection with the book, I think, was the narration. That just really got both ages of the character that follows so intimately, and a lot of it is sort of internal monologue and processing of what is happening, and I feel like the narrator really got her character. And there's also actually in the audiobook, at the end of the audiobook, there's a conversation between the author, the narrator, and an interviewer. And that was also really interesting to hear sort of how she approached making this audiobook. So I would highly recommend this. If it's a book that you've already sort of been interested in especially, then I would definitely recommend the audiobook version. Next is sort of an author and a narrator, especially the combination of those two. So I've already talked about one of this author's books, and that is Remarkable Creatures by Tracy Chevalier that I read I think in April last year. A Remarkable Creature is a fictionalized account of Mary Anning, who was a fossil hunter, and her discoveries of fossils had major impact in the development of geology and paleontology, and sort of made breakthroughs in the ideas around evolution. So the way that Remarkable Creatures fictionalizes this is telling the story of Mary Anning, and in particular her relationship and friendship with a girl called Elizabeth Philpott. So the combination of Tracy Chevalier's historical fiction and Hattie Morahan's narration was just one of the most comforting reading experiences that I had last year. And I know that I've talked about this endlessly throughout last year, and I'm sure I've already mentioned it at least once before this year. And also this combo, the author and the narrator, has happened again with The Girl with the Pearl Earring, where Hattie Morahan has also done a narration. And this is definitely the more well-known of Tracy Chevalier's books. I read it at the beginning of this year, and this is the story of a girl who starts working in Johannes Vermeer's house. So she starts working as sort of a maid and cleans his studio because she has an eye for detail. She's sort of got the job because of that skill. And a lot of the book is her relationship with Johannes Vermeer himself, and there's a lot of tension going there, and also her relationship with the other members of the family and the household. The way that Chevalier's imagination and setting, especially, I think she does, the sense of place is so complete in her imagining of these historical events or historical people, and Hattie Morahan's narration is so good at capturing the character and sort of encapsulating the character in her voice that I found myself with both books to be completely transported. And I think that's one of the reasons that I've enjoyed my reading experiences with Chevalier so much so far, because I've listened to Hattie Morahan's narration of both. I highly recommend both. They're fantastic, and especially if you like historical fiction, you cannot go wrong with these, in my opinion. The next audiobook that I want to talk about is The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Barbary and narrated by Barbara Rosenblatt and Cassandra Morris. So audiobooks with more than one narrator isn't necessarily something that is like a strength for me. It obviously helps if it is narrators doing with a lot of characters, for example. That could definitely work. Or it could be sort of one of the upsides to an audiobook over a physical book. But with this one, it's just the fact that they are perfectly matched, the voices with the characters. This book is the story of an apartment building and the concierge of the apartment building and one of its inhabitants. So on the one hand, we have the concierge, who is a 50-year-old something, snarky and really smart, but also kind of distant and unsocial character called Renee. And then on the other hand, we have a 12-year-old girl called Paloma, who is really lonely, and she's also really smart, but she is lonely and sort of detached from everyone around her. And so the book flicks back and forth between these two characters and sort of being in their heads. Audiobooks with really character-centered storylines, I think, work especially well because you sort of get a life narrative through a voice. It just, that kind of match really works for me, as does the historical fiction, because there is sort of a life story kind of unfolding. So I think that is one of the themes for me generally with audiobooks, and this one is a perfect example of a character study with a really strong audiobook version. It's just a really fun, and a lot of the time it's also really funny, which is something that we could definitely all use at the moment. It's lighthearted, but it also has some hard-hitting moments, and I just really enjoyed the audio version of this one, so I would definitely recommend it. The translator of this book is Alison Anderson. So I also wanted to mention two audiobooks that I listened to last year and that I really enjoyed. So first we have The Trouble with Ghosts and Sheep by Joanna Cannon and narrated by Paula Wilcox. It's set in the 1970s in England, in a really small tight-knit community, and there's a woman going missing, and there's sort of uproar about her unknown destination. Two young girls in the community starts to try investigate what happened to this woman and her disappearance and the reason for it. Alongside the disappearance, you also find out that there's sort of this dark secret in the community that happened a few years prior, and that it's somehow linked to the present situation. I think one of the things that I loved about this is the young narrators, or the characters that you see this book through mainly. So they have, because they're young, they are seeing what is happening and the tension between the characters in the town in a different light. But you also see as a reader the what is going on around them, and see more and understand more than the young sleuths do. Another aspect of this book that I found really enjoyable was the fact that it is this sort of gossipy small town, and that everyone knows each other, and it's a really hot summer, and there's sort of a really strong tone and atmosphere of this book that, again, I think the audio version just really captured so well. I think for me, usually with audiobooks, either it succeeds in getting a voice across really well, or it manages to paint a picture of a place and time that I can completely imagine myself within. And I think with this book, it sort of combines both of those strengths. It's just a really fun and also actually really interesting book with a lot of interesting questions about outsiders and suspicion and trust between people. And then the last one that I wanted to recommend today is The Hoarder by Jess Kidd, narrated by Aoife McMahon. So this one is sort of a contemporary gothic. Again, there's a mystery at the center of it. There's a man who is a hoarder, and a woman starts working to sort of clean up his house, and through her cleaning she finds out that there's a family secret. Man himself is accused of having killed his wife some years ago, and there's a lot of other family secrets in the lurking of this book. And the woman isn't really supposed to start detective work, but she does anyway, and it's just sort of the building tension of this house, and there's a haunted atmosphere throughout the book as well. And again, this is the case of a really transportive and immersive reading experience, and the narrator is also Irish, I think, which is one of my favorite aspects of the audio, because for me, a narrator with a dialect or an accent somehow that fits with the story is another element or layer to the reading experience that I really appreciate. But I really enjoyed this one, and if you've been thinking about reading Jess Kidd, then I would definitely recommend the audio of this one at least. So those are the recent audiobook favorites that I have and that I wanted to be able to share with you. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you've listened to any of these audiobooks. I would love to know your thoughts about them in the comments below. Also, let me know if you have any audiobook recommendations for me. I'm always up for those. I know that with audiobook narrators, it is sort of subjective in what we like in these voices, but I think in general it's sort of difficult to navigate sometimes all of the options out there and knowing what's worth the listen and not. So I thought that I would share my favorites, and you will feel free to share yours as well. So I hope you're having a good day and that you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon.